Okay, Baruch haba. Welcome everyone. Here we are on the, this is the 19th Torah portion. We're 19 weeks into the ancient triennial cycle, where we will be completing the entire Torah at a slower scale than usually, but a more ancient reading, where it takes 3.5 years to finish. So we will finish it twice in a Schmittah cycle, a single Schmittah cycle. As you remember, the command, the mitzvah, is for all the people to come together and to read the Torah on the Schmittah year, right? The year of release. And that's, we have that year right now. In Israel, the farmers, they are not harvesting their crops this year as commanded in the Torah. That still happens. So if you buy any produce from Israel, you have to make sure this year that it says kosher l'shmita, that it's kosher for the Schmittah cycle. It was not harvested from Israel this year. That will make fruits not kosher. People think fruit and vegetables are always kosher, but it's not true. It's always kosher as long as it was not violated, the commandment was not violated, to harvest it in the sabbatical year, the 7th year of rest. Okay, let's open with a quick prayer. Avinu Malkeinu, toda lecha lechol asher shome'im et koli achshav ken yiratzon ki timalei et fi hayom Adonai ki ani yachol ledaber rak ki ata rotzeh. Tishlach na aleinu et ruach hakodesh Adonai b'zchut Yeshua HaMashiach. Father, I'm so grateful. May you bless everyone who's here, who hears my voice today. And may you also touch my mouth, my lips, that I might speak only that which you want heard. Please send upon us your Holy Spirit. We give you praise and glory for all these things in the name of Yeshua, the Messiah. Okay, so here we are. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Oh, yeah, let me open up the chat. I see there's some chats coming in. If you're new, if you're a visitor, our protocol is you can type a question or a dispute or whatever you like over in the chat channel. Just please do not spell out God's sacred name if you do that. Yeah, so that's, everything will be fine as long as you guys just do it that way. Okay, and I've got the chat open. I'm looking. Baruch Hashem. All right, mostly just greetings right now at this point. Okay, so here we are. The Torah portion is VeHashen Paqad. Then Adonai took notice. And this word, I don't know how many of you remember this. I think a couple of years ago, in when we were doing the annual readings, I shared 4 or 5 slides with the different meanings this word can have. It's really a rich word in Hebrew, Paqad. So we'll touch on a few of the meanings today, but I don't intend to repeat that lesson. That is out there on the other YouTube channel we have. Oh, and by the way, there's a neat trick. Let me see here if I have that open. The way that we've been documenting the new YouTube channel, the Torah.ph channel. Let me see if I can pull that out. Hold on just a second. No. Oh, here we go. Okay. No, just a sec. Okay. I want to show you guys. You might not be aware of this ability we have. Let me see if I can make you see this tab. All right, here we go. So here's YouTube. So if you're in YouTube and you remember one of my drashes, there's a subject you didn't catch so well, or something you wanted to re-review, but you don't know which drash it's in, or say there's just a subject in general we've talked about before, and it might be in multiple drashot. So I've been kind of painstakingly documenting the subject indices in our drashot over at Torah.ph YouTube channel. So what you can do is you go to YouTube, and you see how we have a search window open here, and what you do is you type it like this. So the example I used the other day, we had some commentary over in the Hebrew Literacy chat group about a teaching I'd given a few times that says about Adonai, right? What the meaning is in Hebrew, the literal meaning of Adonai. So let's just use that as an example. So maybe you remember that I said it was my lords. You can also type it in Hebrew. A lot of the stuff I have documented in Hebrew too, but let's just say you remember it was my lords. So you do that in quotes, and then you need to do this plus, quote, Torah space PH, okay? That'll make sure to limit it to our channel for the most part. Okay, then you do the search, let's see. All right, YouTube comes back, and sure enough, I mentioned that in Josh number 16 this year, in Parashat Vayera Live, part 2 of the 3 parts that are out there. So you could just you can open up this drash, this part of the drash. Okay, and let's see. And then how do I see the comments? Okay, yeah, so here we go. See underneath, we have our detailed comment section, and there it is, Adonai, my lords. So if you want to hear just that part, you click here on the time index, and it's going to load up that part of the video just clicked on. My lords is what that means. In fact, even when we pray Adonai, the word means my lords. Right, so there's kind of, I think even we can see a more ancient tradition here, understanding the concept of Adonai's complex unity, right? That he is lords, plural. Okay, that goes on for a while. But anyway, so you get the idea. So our drashes that we have today on Shabbat, these will be, we will replay them in 3 parts during the week. That doesn't mean don't come on Shabbat, okay? Because sometimes stuff gets edited out, and there's things that happen on Shabbat. Plus, it's a mitzvah. We're supposed to have a Mikah Kodesh today. But, add music and some effects and stuff. And we have a live sharing of it on Monday nights at 9 p.m. here in the Philippines, or 8 a.m. Eastern Standard. And then on Wednesdays, we have a 9 p.m. showing a part 2. And on Thursdays, we have a 9 p.m. showing of part 3. So I break up the drash into 3 parts. And we have all the other stuff going on. Also on Wednesday, 2 p.m., we have a Bible study led by Sister Annie. And on Sundays at 4:30 p.m., we have our intermediate level 2 Hebrew group, which you're welcome to audit. You can come in. We talk about stuff other than just Hebrew. We bring up the sages and stuff as well as the students are translating the text. And Tuesday night is actually closed. That's the beginner's Hebrew class. That's closed group unless you want to be added to the group, and you can talk to me about that. All right, so there's quite a lot going on. Plus on Shabbat at 10 a.m., we have the elder drash. Our elders, one of them gives a drash, and then here we are at 4:30. So that's that. Hopefully you can make better use of the YouTube channel. That way you can just type in quotes what you're searching for, and then plus quote Torah PH, and you should. Sometimes it'll list multiple videos, right? If it's something we taught about a lot, then you can just go in and just look at the time code. You don't have to listen to the whole thing. All right. Hopefully that'll be useful for you guys. All right. So let's get going. Oh, I forgot to give credit to the website where I took this from. The picture of the cute baby, that is, I think it was medicalanswers.com. I think that's where I got that from. Anyway. So, the reading in the triennial cycle for today, as noted in the Masorah, is Genesis chapter 21. And the Haftarah is 1 Samuel chapter 2, verses 21 and on, which is interesting. The Nach group, the group that's reading the Torah, the Nach in the Hebrew this year, this was one of our readings this past, very recently. And here is a picture of the Westminster Leningrad Codex. So this is about 1,000 years old. It's the oldest completely marked up Tanakh, Hebrew Bible, which means it has all the vowels and all of the accent marks in it. And this is in St. Petersburg, Russia. You can see here on the right, here's our sedra marker. So you can see I'm not just making up the Torah portion for today. And some idiot communist wrote on the document 21,1. You know that's a European, either Russian or European, because Americans don't do the commas that way. So, just total communistic disregard for anything religious. I mean, who cares that it's a 1,000-year-old artifact? It's just write on it with pencil. It just unbelievable. The spirit of communism, the disregard for priceless. This is a priceless artifact. You couldn't put a price on this. I don't know, maybe $1 billion or something to find. This is the only completely intact with vowels and accent marks that is 1,000 years old. There's others that are newer, right? So, yeah, we have Torah scrolls in this, and we have Tanakhs, but without the vowel markers. You understand? This is just a priceless item. It's got the full Masorah, the comments on the side and on the bottom. Now, this is the Hebrew Bible, right? A lot of it doesn't get translated into English, but just some godless commie decided to just write on it with pencil. It's just insane. I don't know if that's pen or pencil or what. Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you, Vikoy. Vikoy says, nice tech, wonderful to know, easy to study more. Right. In our other channel, the searches will work sometimes, but I wasn't ever able to go through and do the detailed documentation like that. Remember, I kept asking for volunteers to help. We never got any volunteers. So, so the new one is really where your search will have the best case of success, although it doesn't have all the topics that our other one has, right? We don't have like the teaching about Yeshua being born on September 11th, 3 BC, right? That's on the other channel, right? And all these sorts of stuff. So you might, I don't know how well some of the other videos have subtitles, so it might be searchable on the subtitles, but this at least works on our new channel, and our index will be growing. Okay. All right, so here we are. Let's get into it then. Here we have chapter Kaf Aleph. You guys remember? Kaf is 20 in Hebrew, and Aleph is 1. So this is chapter 21. Wow, those dogs are getting loud. And it says, I'm thinking there's another room down here in the basement that's away from the window. And I've just been looking for Dr. DeVere suggested egg crates, but I haven't been able to find those online. If anybody knows where to find egg crates as a kind of a cheap way, it's too echoey the room. I'd like to soundproof the room, and then we can have the drush in there. We don't hear all this noise outside. It's usually not this loud. So, well, maybe you don't hear it. Let's see. Let me just again. That's what I'm talking about. So it says, Adonai Paqad et Sarah kasher amar vayahas Adonai v'Sarah kasher diber. Then Adonai Paqad, and this is that word that we're talking about that has pages and pages of meanings. So let's just, traditionally, many translations will say visit, noticed, remembered, something like this. So let's just go with maybe like noticed or remembered. Sarah, Kasher Amar, according to how he had promised. So Amar, you guys, most of you know that means to say, right? And yeah, someone wrote about thank you for that advice. Yeah, but I was looking for the cheaper eggshell ones, not the normal dampener foams. That can get kind of pricey doing the walls with that. So Amar, it can mean promise, actually. And as we've been discussing in the intermediate Hebrew group, this depends on who's speaking, if it's a person or if it's God. So when God is the subject of Amar, it can actually imply a promise because he said it. We know that he doesn't lie, right? So you could interpret this as promised, according to how Adonai had promised. Vaya'as Adonai, so Adonai did l'Sarah for Sarah ka'asher diber, according to how he had spoken. And this is a linguistic device we have here. This is kind of interesting. There's so many things. People wonder, hey, is it worth learning the original languages of the Bible? Is it worth, doing the Hebrew and the Greek? And by the way, I'm not saying that apostolic writings are in Greek originally. It's just that's how we have them. And some of Paul's letters probably were originally Greek. Hold on, someone's microphone's on. Please remember, don't use your microphones. I hit mute all. The protocol today is no mics. This is only the other classes you can have mic, yeah? Yeah, okay. So this is there's people ask what's worth learning, right? When you do the original language, well, other than noticing certain mistranslations or differences in translation possibilities that happen, there are beautiful stylistic linguistic devices that we just don't always have in English. And here we have one here. This is called an inclusio. Inclusio. Sta mangiando Luigi per favore. Inclusio. Sorry, the Italians are trying to get in here. So inclusio, or inclusion in English. And so what it does is it marks off all the text that's between those two words or phrases forming the inclusio. And actually, I think I made a mistake here. The inclusio is bigger than this. In this case, it's ka'asher amar and ka'asher diber. Right? You see, it's these full. So as he said or promised and as he spoke. Right? And so all that in between is part of the inclusion. Sometimes an inclusion or an inclusio, it can actually span many paragraphs. Right? And so it's very interesting to note how the Bible is full of these. Yeah, there's many, many literary devices that sometimes it's hard to bring across into English, right? Or we wouldn't notice because the word pairing isn't as obvious. So let's look here at Paqad. Actually, first let's look at this whole phrase. And Adonai visited or noticed Sarah. So according to Rabbi Rashi, I got to pull up this chat. Okay. Strange. What is that here? Oh, hold on. All right. There we go. According to Rabbi Rashi, it places the section after the preceding one, right? So the one we just read last week, to teach you that whoever prays for mercy on behalf of another, remember, Abraham Avinu, he prayed for Avimelech, right, in his household, that the women would be able to get pregnant again. Remember? When he himself also is in need, right? So Abraham is also in need of Sarah to get pregnant, right? But he's praying for Avimelech, right? And it says, so Rashi comments that someone praying for the thing that he needs, but for somebody else on the other's behalf, will himself first receive a favorable response from God. For it is said at the end of the last chapter, and Abraham prayed for Avimelech and his wife, and they brought forth. And then it goes on to say, children. And immediately afterwards, it states here. So we're just in the next section. Remember, these chapters are artificial. 21 was added later. The chapters were added to the Bible in the current era, in the common era. They were not originally part of the text. The same is true with the verse numbers. This was added within the last millennium, for the Hebrew Bible within the last 500 years, less than 500 years. So this section would have been juxtaposed to the previous, so it's more obvious what the Torah is teaching. Because remember, the Torah is not necessarily chronological. Not everything comes in order, right? And so oftentimes things are arranged in a manner so that we can learn from the stories and the juxtaposition of a story next to another story. So that's what Rashi's pointing out here, and he's basing it on the Talmud, on Tractate Bava Kama, page 92, the front side of the page. So that, because we already had that, so we get this concept, we extrapolate this concept that if you have a need, it's good for you to pray for others to have that need. In a way, if you think about it, guys, this is the opposite of ayin hara, right? It's the opposite of the evil eye, right? So for those of you who aren't familiar, the evil eye, it's this concept that when you see somebody else with something, and you either think or you say, you express an emotion that it's unjust that they have it, right? That you should be the one to have it and they don't deserve it, right? Or sometimes ayin hara is very, very evil, and the person doesn't even care if they have it or not. They just don't want the other person to have the thing. It could be children, it could be wealth, it could be a nice vehicle, a new motorcycle or something. It could be like a tablet. Oh, why can't I have that? What the problem is not in wanting to have a thing like that. The problem is in the judgment of the other person that they don't deserve it. And usually when people have the evil eye, they are not expressing outright, literally, why do they have it? They don't deserve it. I should have it, right? It's very, very rare that a person is so immature to express all of that. But what we have to watch in ourselves is the sentiment that they don't deserve it. Because this is actually connected to the mitzvah, lo tachmod et rayecha. You shall not, usually translated covet your neighbor. But the word chamad, it's from tachmod, it's from chamad, which means like to really desire something, to find something pleasurable. But the nuance, we could have just said ratzon, right? Or ratzah, to want something. The nuance with chamad here in the mitzvah is that you want it and you think they don't deserve it, right? I mean, it's more clear when the Aseret Devorot talk about lo tachmod aishet reyecha. Don't covet your neighbor's wife, right? The idea is that you can't both have her, right? So the idea is you deserve her, he doesn't. This is where the evil eye comes from. And of course, our Messiah, Yeshua, he warns us, if your eye is evil, your whole body is filled with evil, right? It's filled with darkness, right? And so he's referring also to this Jewish concept of the ayin hara, the evil eye. So this is the opposite. The way our father Abraham behaves is the opposite. Instead, he wants a kid, and he's already almost 100 years old. And what does he do? He prays for Avimelech, the guy who took his wife, right? You can see where many, many derivatives of his actions come into play in the apostolic writings. The famous "do unto others as you have them do unto you," right? Which was originally taught by Rabbi Hillel, right before Yeshua. Yeshua's saying Rabbi Hillel is correct. Hillel teaches, do not do to others that which is detestable to you, right? So don't do anything mean to somebody else that you would not want something done to you. And Yeshua, he improves a little bit. He makes it a little bit more difficult. He's agreeing with Rabbi Hillel, the Hillelite Pharisee, and he's saying, let's make it harder. Instead, do to others as you want them to do to you, right? So you kind of go out of your way to be nice and do these sorts of things. And so we see this really in Abraham's dealings with Avimelech. He's going above and beyond. He's praying for him, and his whole household, that they might be able to get pregnant again, all the women in the household. Any comments or questions? I hope the fan's not too loud. I don't have it directed towards the microphone. All right, let's talk about Paqad, this word Adonai Paqaded Sarah. So, according to the modern scholar Speiser teaches us, he says, took note, this is how he translates it, took note, and that's how I oftentimes translate it too. The primary sense of the common and richly shaded stem, Paqad, traditionally visited, is suitable at best in punitive contexts alone. But then he gives us some examples of other places in Scripture and how it's used. So for the providential meaning, right, like heaven is involved in something of Hebrew Paqad, you guys can check out, you note takers, here are some places, Psalm 8, Psalm 65. The judgmental usage is found in Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, chapter 32, verse 34, Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 18, verse 25, Numbers 14:18, Deuteronomy 5:9, Job 31, verse 14. But the redemptive connotation can be found in Genesis chapter 50, verse 24, Shemot, Exodus chapter 3, verse 16, 4:31, 13:19, and Jeremiah 29:10, Zephaniah 2, verse 7, Ruth chapter 1, verse 60. So it's nice he breaks it down in these kind of three categories of meanings, but it is a very rich word. From this word we get Pikadon, which is like an appointee. We get Kade in the PL, which is like to visit with bad consequences. And again, we have this in the Aseret Deborot, the Ten Commandments, where it says, what's it say that Adonai does? It says he's an Eil Kana, a jealous God, Piked Avon Avot Al Benim, right? Piked, that is visiting the Avon, the intentional sin, oftentimes translated iniquity, but nobody knows what iniquity means versus sin. So it's the intentional sins onto the children, right, of the third and the fourth generations, right? Meaning that there's a consequence when parents do intentional sins, and it affects your children. They're affected by our intentional sinning, by our lawlessness, by our downplaying of the Torah, sometimes we relish in certain iniquities, as if it's a mitzvah, as if it's a good deed almost. And this is not the case. We shouldn't relish when we do something that is against God's word, because his Torah is the definition of what sin is, as we were reminded by Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul. If not for the law, I would not have known what sin is, which means, what, are we smarter than Paul? We're smarter than Rabbi Shaul? No. So if we want to know what sin is, we also look to the Torah, the Torah Hashem, the law of God. That's what defines it, not societal norms. Oftentimes, various denominations, they are very legalistic. And legalism does not mean they obey God's laws. Legalism means they make up their own laws, and they think that is what you should do, and while at the same time ignoring God's laws. And of course, the Messiah. Well, one example of this is in the South, in the United States, where I grew up. And by the way, I'm not picking on Southern Baptists. Southern Baptists do a lot of good in the world. There's a lot of missionary activity. And they do a lot of good to bring the light of Messiah to the world. But in this instance, dancing is considered a sin, right? Dancing in the Southern Baptist community, and so it's interesting that, and so is drinking, right? Drinking. Let's pick drinking. That's a better example, because dancing can be sinful, depending on what the dancing is, right? So, private dancer for money. Tina Turner. I think private dancing is probably not a good idea. So, but drinking, please. Drinking is a sin. Have you read Mishlei? Have you read Proverbs about alcohol? How it's good for the soul and such. Have you? What is Yeshua's first miracle? What did he do first at the very beginning? His first documented miracle. He turned water into wine, didn't he? At the wedding in Cana, right? And so he's helping people to sin. And they've already drank a lot that night already, right? Because remember, the steward says, wow, usually people say use the best wine first, and then as the night goes on and people are drunk, they give them the bad wine. But you saved the best for last, right? So not only did he give people wine to drink, he waited until they'd been drinking all night long to give them wine to drink. So let's not be legalistic. Let's not invent new sin categories while ignoring the actual Torah himself. Yeshua warns us about this behavior when he instructs the Shammaites. He says, look, you, by traditions which you've invented, and we are not speaking its tradition in general. Don't misunderstand me here. This is not a Hebrew roots take on things. But sometimes a tradition, like not drinking with the Southern Baptists, telling people that it's a sin, right, can actually end up being used in such a way that it violates God's law. And he says, you, through your tradition, you violate God's law, right? For you say that when your parent needs something, you say, oh, I'm sorry, what I was going to give to you, I already pledged to the temple, right? So the person violates, make way to your father and your mother, right? So this comes all around. So anyway, so we will side with the Apostle Paul's teachings that all sin is defined in the Torah, and without the Torah, we don't know what sin would have been. So there's some comments here. Tet comments that providential, judgmental, redemptive meanings, right? That's the shpa. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't Speiser, that was Sarna. I'm sorry, Sarna. The second comment block here is from the Jewish scholar from the Jewish Publication Society, Sarna. The first one is Speiser, and the next one is Sarna. Yeah, exactly. I should have colorized the different blocks. It would have been easier to see. And Ted goes on to comment, recording function of Paqad, numbered, accounted, surveyed, census, as you taught us before. Right. We have that teaching somewhere on the other channel. But yeah, there's so many meanings for this word. Now, that does not mean, sometimes people, they start to get into original language, and they think that if you find out a word has 7 meanings, let's say, right, that it means all of those things in every instance, right? So I've heard pastors do this before. Well, they'll look up a word and they'll be going through, look, it's this and this and this, and then, so then their teaching is, so you got to do all those things in that verse. No, that's not how language works. Okay, the way it works is a word has several shades of meaning possibilities, and then the instantiation of the word in context helps us to unlock which meaning or meanings are there. Sometimes you have a play on words where sometimes the author does intend more than one meaning, right? But for example, like in the Psalms, we have Magan, right? Magan, often pointed Magen, shield, can also be pointed Magaan, suzerain, right? Like that God is our suzerain. He's the one who provides for us. So sometimes there is a double meaning, but you don't get to just enumerate all the meanings and say, therefore, it's all these things. So then the teaching has now become, instead of commanding us to do one thing, now it's like 20 things. That's not how it works. The purpose of looking at all the meanings of a word is so we have that available to us to see if there might be translational bias, or maybe it's just hard to bring it into English or another language, right? Remember what the great physicist and Orthodox Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan said, all translation is commentary. So when you're reading the Bible in translation, you must understand that you are held hostage to the worldview of those translators, right? If they believe the law is dead and was crucified on the cross and these kind of things, if that's their translational preference, then they will translate accordingly. Okay. Now, the Targum is very interesting, the Jerusalem Targum here. The Aramaic translates Paqad as nisin. Well, actually, it's these verbs, avad nisin, right? And the Lord, or Hashem, that's the Yod, wrought miracles. Nisin are miracles in Aramaic for Sarah, as he had spoken. So Paqad here is understood by this Second Temple period Aramaic translation of the Torah to actually mean avad nisim. He worked miracles. Isn't that interesting? And of course, it is what happens. So the tradition is that Sarah had no womb, and that God ended up giving her a womb now. So there's a regeneration that happens inside of her body. Dr. DeVere comments, if Adonai visits Paqad, the iniquities of, it's actually Piked in the PL, right? The PL binyan, the more intense binyan. The iniquities of the fathers on the children, Piked means punitive. Does he punish the children? Yeah, that's a great question. Great question, Doc. So my understanding of visiting the iniquities on the children of the third and fourth generation, what that means is that he has set a system into place in this world where we are influenced by our DNA, we're influenced by the psychology of our environs, how we're raised, right? We're influenced by good or evil spirits that are roaming around, and we're influenced by teachers, right? Many things can influence a child to behave a certain way. Now, DNA, I think, is what God has in mind here. That we have in Yedid Nefesh on the Kabbalat Shabbat, when we're welcoming the Sabbath on Friday night, there's a song that sometimes people like to sing that's traditional. Yedid Nefesh, Avarach, so it's beloved of my soul, merciful Father, right? And at one point it says, my soul is injured, please heal her, right? Meaning that my life force has been damaged from sin. And so the sin actually damages us. It separates us further from the Duma that God intended for us, the likeness, right? Remember, we're made in Dumato, in his likeness. And so I believe that this means that the DNA of Adam Rishon was much better than the DNA we have today. So, for example, it's been shown that alcoholism can be encoded in the DNA. The DNA of an alcoholic can affect the children. So the child, even who doesn't grow up with that alcoholic person, can be more prone to trying to get higher dopamine levels in the brain from doing this type of activity of drinking too much, right? So that something changes in his DNA so that his children's teeth are set on edge, is how I would interpret that. So I think this is what it's talking about, Doc, meaning that the mechanism of procreation that God has created is set in such a way, it's a warning to the parents. If you behave sinfully, this could affect your children, even if you don't raise your children or even if you do not know them. Again, this is just my interpretation. I could be wrong. I hope that helps, Doc. Okay. Yeah, like inherited, right? Exactly. That's what I mean. It could be a situation too. It might not be DNA, right? So let's say that. Okay, I'll just tell you. I have a friend who, when he was early in the Philippines, he came across some street children over by immigration, and one of the little girls was just so amazing, right? Like just very much like Yeshua. Like she was, even though she's the one who asked for the money, she was the one who, when they went to a restaurant together with like a bunch of boys and the little girl, a bunch of her friends were street boys, she was making sure all the other kids ate first, right? And so just such a beautiful child, the street child. And this friend of mine, he ended up trying to help her family when they found her father. Also, he's a homeless person, right? And they got sponsors, and they bought the father and the son, the oldest son, 2 pedicabs. You know, those little bicycle, like they have a bicycle and they have a car on the side, right, to take people around. And they gave a plan to them. They said, look, there's no boundary on this, but you're going to give 10%, and the 10% will be saved, and that will be used to help buy for half of a motorcycle, right, a trike. So eventually they would have tricycle, right? So their income will go up and up. And then when you do the trike long enough, there'll be boundary paid, and that will contribute towards buying a taxi someday, right? And so really a way out of poverty for this family. And they had many, many kids. But what happens? Turned out the father gambled away the 2 pedicabs, and so the family was stuck in poverty. So I think this verse can also mean that. So the situation, he's got a gambling addiction, and maybe his children won't be gamblers, but they're living on the street. And what happens now? They had a way out of poverty. All they do is work a little bit, ride these pedicabs, and instead the children get nothing. They got nothing because his sins are being visited on the children. Yeah, that's right, Doc. Okay, Naomi says the lifestyle people lead affect epigenetic markers in their DNA, and this is passed on to the offspring. Yeah, well put. Thanks, Naomi. Yeah, exactly. Okay, any other comments or questions? Another Targum Yonatan, actually it's called Pseudo Yonatan on Genesis, translates very similarly, but it says that the Avad Adonai, the Soro, Niso. So then Adonai did for Sarah the miracle, the miraculous miracle of wisdom. Usually the idea of something wondrous. So it's quite amazing.
Congratulations, you finished this part. If you want to stand with us financially, please visit our patreon.com address listed on the screen. Another way to help is by subscribing to our channel and hit the bell so you get notifications. Or you can like it with a thumbs up. This helps us, as well as leaving a comment down below. All these things help show YouTube how important these teachings are. If you'd like to get involved in our yearly Hebrew reading of the prophets and the writings, Contact us below and we'll let you know how you can do that. Kol hakavod l'Adonai. All the glory is to Adonai.